They gave us 72 hours to abandon our own. Admiral Eris Thorne stood on the command deck of the Terran Mandate ship Balance, his form a statue carved from discipline and fatigue. Before him, the main hololith displayed the serene blue-white marble of Oakhaven, a world held hostage. Around it, the brutalist iron-gray ships of the hegemony fleet formed a cage of breathtaking arrogance. The stakes were simple and obscene, the lives of 3.2 million colonists against the hegemony's demand for 10,000 souls to be handed over for ideological re-education. A crimson timer pulsed in the corner of the display, stark and unforgiving. 71:58:12. They are broadcasting their ultimatum on all civilian channels, Admiral Operations Officer Kenji Tanaka reported, his voice tight. They want Oakhaven's people to watch the clock tick down. The ambient hum of the bridge was underscored by the faint, rhythmic hiss of the life support recyclers, a sound Thorne had always found calming, but which now felt like a serpent's whisper. Thorne's gaze remained fixed on the enemy fleet. It isn't for them, Kenji. It's for us. It is a performance of power, and we are the intended audience. He ran a hand over the cool metal of the command rail, feeling the faint vibration of the ship's fusion heart. They believed a clock could break a promise. The fleet-mind Pathfinder manifested as a column of shimmering blue light beside the command chair. Its voice was serene, a counterpoint to the tension coiling in the air. Admiral, my projections remain consistent. In a direct fleet engagement, our probability of mission success is 17.3%. We are outmassed by a factor of 2.1, and our effective weapon range is at a 12% deficit. Numbers define the frame, Pathfinder, not the picture, Thorne replied, his voice a low baritone that seemed to absorb the bridge's nervous energy. Give me updated telemetry on their shield harmonics. I want to know how their projectors handle cascade failures right down to the microsecond. Tactical Officer Eva Rostova shifted at her console, the glare of her screen reflecting in her sharp eyes. Sir, a cascade failure implies we can get a shot past their outer screen. They have us boxed in. A direct thrust is suicide. She did not hide the aggressive edge in her tone. That is why we will not be making a direct thrust, Commander Thorne said, turning from the hololith to face his team. The deck plates beneath their feet gave a subtle thrum, a constant reminder of the contained power waiting to be unleashed. The hegemony's doctrine is their greatest weapon, and it will be their greatest vulnerability. Hegemony doctrine was a hammer that saw everything as a nail. Before the first plan could be set in motion, Thorne patched into Oakhaven's civilian broadcast relay. It was a filtered feed, a desperate attempt by the colony's government to maintain morale. He saw a family huddled in their small apartment, the city's glowing architecture visible through their window. A young girl, no older than 8, pointed a shaky finger at the screen where the hegemony warships hung like daggers. Mama, she asked, her small voice tinny through the pickup. Why are the sky ships so angry? The mother pulled her close, her own face a mask of forced calm. They're just lost, sweet girl. The good ships are coming to show them the way home. Thorne cut the feed, the image burned into his mind. Pathfinder. I want every micro-decoy and signal spoofer prepped for launch. Thorne commanded, his voice now devoid of any earlier weariness. Target the gaps in their sensor grid. Not the ships, their perception. You are attempting to create ghosts, Admiral Pathfinder inquired, the light of its column pulsing gently. Yes, Thorne confirmed. We are going to give their hammer 1,000 nails to strike at once. Their certainty would become our canvas. The plan was a high-speed convoy run a desperate attempt to deliver essential supplies and, more importantly, a message of hope to the besieged colony. 6 automated freighters stripped of all non-essential mass were flanked by 2 EW corvettes, the Whisper and the Echo. They were insects challenging titans, but they carried a unique sting. The console glare on the bridge of the Balance intensified as Rostova coordinated the launch sequence, her knuckles white. "Convoy is away," Admiral Tanaka reported, his eyes scanning the telemetry flowing across his screen. "Accelerating to attack vector." Lord Justicar Valerius of the hegemony flagship Iron Resolve would be expecting this. It was a predictable response, the desperate lunge of a cornered animal. His doctrine demanded a swift, overwhelming counter. He would not disappoint. As anticipated, the hegemony fleet reacted instantly, their forward batteries glowing with nascent power. The scent of ozone, faint but sharp, seemed to vent from the circulation system, a phantom of the battle to come. We would teach them the meaning of doubt. They are taking the bait. Rostova confirmed, a grim smile touching her lips. Multiple weapon locks detected. They're targeting the primary signatures. As they should, Thorne said calmly. He leaned forward, his focus absolute. Pathfinder now. Release the ghosts. From the escort corvettes, a cloud of micro-drones erupted, each no bigger than a fist. They did not explode. Instead, they activated, projecting a complex web of reflective energy fields, the mirror lattice. Simultaneously, the corvettes began to pulse, a storm of false signals timed to insert themselves precisely between the refresh sweeps of the hegemony's targeting sensors. The enemy's tactical displays, once clean and orderly, dissolved into a blizzard of phantom contacts. Ghosts in the machine began to sing our song. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Valerius watched his perfect blockade integrity collapse into chaos. Dozens, then hundreds of hostile contacts bloomed across his holotank. His tactical officers shouted contradictory reports, their disciplined voices cracking with confusion. He had overwhelming force, yet he no longer knew where to point it. "Filter the signals," Valerius roared, his voice booming across his own command deck. "Isolate the true vectors," but it was like trying to find a single raindrop in a hurricane. Thorne's deception was flawless. While the hegemony chased phantoms, the 6 real freighters, their own emissions masked by the electronic noise, slipped through a gap in the formation. They moved like shadows under the cover of a manufactured storm. The hum of the Balance's deck plates seemed to steady a reassuring rhythm in the heart of the chaos. The convoy was almost through. Their wall had become a sieve. A single hegemony frigate, operating on a hunch or a lucky guess, fired a volley of plasma bolts blindly into the storm. 5 of the bolts dissipated harmlessly against the shimmering lattice fields. The 6th found a target. It was a grazing hit on the corvette Echo, a flare of incandescent light that momentarily overloaded its shields. Alarms blared across the Balance's bridge. "Report," Thorne's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Echo reports a glancing blow," Tanaka relayed, his fingers flying across his console. "Shields are down to 12%. Minor hull breach on deck 4 contained. We have 2 crew with minor plasma burns, but they're already in the sickbay. The freighter convoy is clear. They've made it to Oakhaven's gravity well." The cost was noted, a small but real entry in the ledger of this conflict. A ripple of relief washed through the bridge crew. They had done it. They had threaded the needle. A suit's internal heartbeat monitor, audible on a nearby comms channel, slowed from a frantic pace to a steady thud. We had opened the cage, if only for a moment. The response from Lord Justicar Valerius was not long in coming. His rage manifested as a single brutal act of communication. He targeted one of Oakhaven's drifting decommissioned orbital stations, a relic of its founding, and atomized it with a single precise lance strike from his flagship. The silent explosion was a punctuation mark to his new message broadcast system-wide. Terran fleet, his voice dripped with cold fury. You mistake theatricality for strategy. This is not a game. For your insolence, the countdown is accelerated. You now have 48 hours. There will be no more warnings. Rostova slammed her fist onto the padded armrest of her station. He's escalating. Our soft approach only made him angrier. We need to hit him back, sir. Show him we have teeth. The glare from her console cast harsh shadows across her furious face. This was the true test of their doctrine. Commander, stand down. Thorn's command was quiet but absolute. His response tells us everything we need to know. His doctrine has no protocol for being outmaneuvered, only for being overpowered. He feels mocked because he cannot comprehend a strategy that doesn't involve brute force. He turned to his officers, his gaze sweeping over each of them. The low vibration of the ship seemed to resonate with his words. This changes our approach. He wants a show of force, he will get one. But it will be on our terms, by our calculus. Pathfinder's light column glowed a steady, contemplative blue. A direct counter-escalation remains a low-probability path, Admiral. I am not planning a counter-escalation, Thorn replied. I am planning a lesson. Remember our way. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Their arrogance had handed us the chalk. Thorn initiated the next phase of his plan, a maneuver that seemed like madness to his crew. He ordered Pathfinder to begin broadcasting data packets into the system on a public low-security frequency. The packets were filled with seemingly useless information, stellar nursery charts, historical records of early colony ships, treatises on xenobotany. It was a stream of academic noise. Admiral, what is the purpose of this? Tanaka asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. We are wasting bandwidth and computational power. The hegemony can easily intercept and decode this. It's civilian-grade encryption. That is the point, Kenji Thorn said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. I want them to listen. I want them to grow complacent, to dismiss it as the babbling of a beaten fleet trying to preserve its culture before it flees. The heat from a nearby processing node washed over them a dry, sterile warmth. A mystery wrapped in data was the perfect bait. While the stream of information flowed, Thorn began a carefully orchestrated withdrawal. He ordered 2 of his heavy cruisers and a squadron of destroyers to burn hard for the system's edge, their engine flares bright and obvious. It was a performance of retreat, a clear signal that the Terran Mandate fleet was conceding the field. They were making a show of abandoning Oakhaven to its fate. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, the mood was triumphant. Valerius watched the Terran ships begin their escape, a sneer on his face. His officers cheered. The ultimatum doctrine had proven itself once more. Power decisively applied had broken the enemy's will. They run, Lord Justicar, his second-in-command, reported gleefully. The cowards know they are beaten. Of course they do, Valerius said, his voice resonating with absolute self-assurance. Let them run. Keep our broadcast live to the homeworld. Our people must witness the triumph of hegemony resolve. Let them see the price of defiance. He was building his own stage for his own downfall. What Valerius didn't know was that Thorn's academic data packets contained a hidden payload. It wasn't a weaponized virus. It was a simple diagnostic worm, a whisper in the machine. It rode the hegemony's own internal monitoring software, triggered by their decryption of the public broadcast. It had one purpose: to report back. Pathfinder confirmation, Thorn asked quietly, his eyes on the tactical display. Confirmed, Admiral, the AI replied. The worm is active. Lord Justicar Valerius is broadcasting this entire confrontation including our apparent retreat on a live, unedited feed to his civilization's public infonet. He is framing it as a testament to his strategic genius. Thorne nodded slowly. He now had his lever. The entire hegemony civilian population was the audience. They were about to see the true nature of their leader's doctrine not as a glorious triumph, but as a rigid, brutal, and flawed instrument. The faint scent of ozone returned not from a weapon, but from an overcharged power conduit as the ship readied itself. We would hold a mirror up to their soul. The retreating ships did not jump. Instead, they used the cover of a dense asteroid field near the system's gas giant to vanish from hegemony sensors. There, in the swirling dust and ice of the planet's rings, they began the quiet, meticulous work of deploying a second, far larger mirror lattice. This was not a tool for deception. It was a weapon system in disguise, a network of thousands of drones creating a vast, controllable, reflective surface. A new civilian vignette flickered onto a secondary screen, a live feed from Oakhaven. The mood had turned somber. The sight of the Terran ships seemingly abandoning them had crushed their hope. A reporter stood in a public square, her voice heavy with despair. "We are alone," she said, her camera panning over the heartbroken faces in the crowd. "The mandate has left us. The clock is still ticking." Thorne watched for a moment, the weight of their despair settling on his shoulders. He would not fail them. The darkest hour is just before the dawn. With the trap almost set, Thorne sent a final formal message to Valerius. He requested permission to send one last unarmed medical freighter to Oakhaven. He framed it as a final humanitarian act, a plea to a merciful victor. "Allow us this one small gesture, Lord Justicar," the message read, "so we may tell our superiors that the hegemony is as honorable as it is powerful." Valerius, his ego swollen by his apparent victory, saw this as the ultimate submission. He would not only grant the request, he would dictate its terms, turning it into one last spectacle of humiliation for the Terran fleet. He replied with a designated flight path for the medical ship. It was a straight, narrow corridor passing directly through the heart of his fleet. "He accepts," Admiral Tanaka confirmed, reading the reply. "He calls it the Corridor of Penance. He wants us to crawl." The deck plates beneath them began to hum at a higher frequency, a tangible sign of the immense power being rerouted through the ship's core systems. Their pride had drawn the map to their own undoing. The Corridor of Penance. Thorne mused, a flicker of cold fire in his eyes. A fitting name. Pathfinder, begin shunting all non-essential power to the resonance grid. I want the main reactor running at 120%. Warning. Admiral Pathfinder's voice remained calm, but a yellow alert icon flashed beside its light column. Operating the reactor at that level for sustained periods risks catastrophic overload. It will not be for a sustained period, Thorne assured the AI. On the bridge, the lights dimmed slightly as power was diverted. The low hum intensified into a palpable vibration, a deep thrum that resonated in the crew's bones. It was the sound of a giant holding its breath, preparing to strike. A suit heartbeat monitor on an open channel ticked up a fast, anxious rhythm against the ship's deep thrum. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. The lone medical freighter, the St. Jude, began its final journey. It was a small, graceful ship, its white hull emblazoned with the Red Cross of the Mandate's Medical Corps. It flew steadily down the center of the Corridor of Penance, a single point of light surrounded by the menacing dark shapes of the hegemony fleet. Their weapon ports were open, their targeting arrays active, a clear and brutal display of dominance for their audience back home. "All elements are in position," Admiral Tanaka reported, his voice hushed with anticipation. "The system-scale lattice is deployed and awaiting alignment." Rostova's hand hovered over her console. her earlier aggression replaced by a focused, predatory stillness. "Energy weapons are spooled, sir. We are ready to open the ledger." Thorn looked at the main hololith at the tiny ship sailing into the jaws of the beast. He thought of the family in the apartment of the reporter's despairing voice. He thought of the two crewmen with their burns. Every action has a cost. Every ultimatum has a price. He was about to make Valerius pay it. Pathfinder Thorn said, his voice as steady as the bedrock of worlds. "The board is set. Time to settle the account." Pathfinder's calm voice responded, the light of its column shifting from blue to a resolute gold. "Account queued, Admiral. The lattice is live. All mirrors are angled to your mark." A transmission cut across the channel, Valerius's voice dripping with triumphant condescension, a final taunt for his audience. "Behold, Admiral Thorn, the price of defiance. Your people will watch you crawl away from this system in shame. Remember this lesson." Thorn did not reply to him. He turned his head slightly, his gaze meeting Rostova's across the dim bridge. He gave a single sharp nod. "Execute." Their greatest weapon was about to become theirs. With Rostova's command, the universe reconfigured. The thousands of drone mirrors in the asteroid belt, each one meticulously positioned, snapped into a single cohesive parabolic array, the size of a small moon. They were invisible, their stealth plating drinking in the ambient light of the system, but they were not passive. They were aimed directly at the corridor of penance at the heart of the hegemony fleet. The console glare on the balance's bridge shifted from tactical blues to a sharp, analytical gold as the lattice reported its perfect alignment. The St. Jude continued its placid journey, a lamb walking through a den of wolves. But the wolves were not watching the lamb. They were admiring their own teeth. Their systems primed, their targeting arrays actively painting the freighter, a constant stream of low-power energy washing over its hull. It was this energy, this casual projection of dominance that Thorn had been counting on. The mirror lattice was not designed to reflect his weapons. It was designed to collect and weaponize their own. They had built a cage of light, and we had found the key. Lattice is now collecting ambient targeting emissions. Pathfinder announced its voice, a calm river in the torrent of imminent action. Energy potential is rising. Stand by to redirect. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Lord Justicar Valerius savored the moment, broadcasting his triumph. "You see," he narrated to his homeworld, "the Terran will is fragile. It cracks under pressure. They send a medical ship as their final act, a plea for a mercy they do not deserve." Then his ship shuddered. It was not a violent impact, but a deep, resonant vibration, as if a giant's tuning fork had been struck against the hull. Alarms began to chirp, low and questioning at first, then rising to a frantic scream. The low hum of his own bridge intensified, the air growing thick with the scent of superheated metal. We did not fire a single shot. Across the hegemony formation, every ship pointing a weapon at the St. Jude was now a target. The energy from their own targeting arrays, collected and focused by the system-scale mirror, was being returned to them 1,000-fold. It was a feedback loop of pure weaponized irony. Shields that were tuned to deflect incoming plasma bolts and kinetic rounds were suddenly being overloaded by their own emissions, turned into an invisible, searing lance. "What is this?" Valerius demanded, his composure shattering. "Report." "Are we under attack?" His tactical officer stared at his console, his face pale with disbelief. "Sir, the energy signature. It's our own. It's being reflected back at us. Our shields are buckling. I don't understand." Their own power had become their poison. "Pathfinder, display the ledger," Thorn commanded. The main hololith split. On one side, the tactical situation, the hegemony fleet writhing in a net of its own making. On the other, a simple, elegant display of columns and numbers. It was a live accounting of the energy being redirected broadcast on the same public channel Valerius was using. The hegemony citizens who had been watching a triumph were now seeing a live dissection of their fleet's vulnerability. They saw the gigawatts being drawn from their own ships, and the precise calculated damage being inflicted. They saw shield integrity dropping, power conduits flashing into incandescent ruin, and weapon emitters melting in their housings. The feed was undeniable, a clinical presentation of a strategic masterstroke. The universe demands balance. We were merely the scales. This is a trick, Valerius roared, his face contorted in a mask of fury. An illusion. All ships fire at will, target the freighter, obliterate it. It was a fatal mistake born of a doctrine that had no answer for finesse. As his fleet responded, their weapon systems cycled from a low-power targeting state to full-power engagement. The energy they poured into the corridor was immense. The mirror lattice drank it all in its drone components, glowing like a new constellation. The feedback loop became a tidal wave. A coolant hiss echoed across Thorn's bridge as the ship's own systems worked to process the flood of telemetry. A hegemony destroyer. The unyielding hammer died first. Its main batteries, charging to fire, overloaded catastrophically. The ship didn't explode in a fireball, but rather imploded, its power core collapsing under the redirected energy. It vanished in a silent, violent flash of light, a testament to its own suicidal obedience. Their obedience became their executioner. Before the next set piece unfolded, Thorn saw a new vignette from Oakhaven appear on a side monitor. The despair in the public square had been replaced by stunned silence, then a rising, incredulous cheer. The people pointed at their sky, where the brutal hegemony ships were now flaring and sputtering, caught in an invisible web. The reporter who had declared them abandoned now held a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "They didn't leave us," she whispered into her microphone. "They never left us." This was the pivot point. Valerius, seeing his fleet being dismantled without a single enemy shot fired, made his final desperate gambit. His doctrine had one last play: if the board is overturned, burn the world beneath it. He ordered the Iron Resolve to reorient, ignoring the Terran fleet entirely. His target was now Oakhaven. "He's targeting the planet." Rostova's voice was a low growl. "Main cannon is powering up. He's going to break the ultimatum himself. A tyrant's final act is always to burn the board." The Iron Resolve was a monster of a ship, its primary weapon capable of cracking a continent. The energy it began to draw was an order of magnitude greater than anything seen before. Pathfinder's light column flashed a brilliant, urgent crimson. "Admiral, the lattice cannot contain a full discharge from that weapon. It will shatter the array, and the beam will strike the planet." "It will not have to contain it all," Thorn said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. He stood before the command rail, the fate of 3.2 million people resting on his next words. The internal conflict was gone. The calculus of mercy had been tried, and the enemy had answered with the promise of atrocity. The time for teaching was over. Pathfinder, reconfigure the lattice. All mirrors focus on a single point. "Target Admiral," the AI asked. Thorn's eyes were locked on the image of the Iron Resolve. The bridge. He forgot that a mirror can focus light into a lance. The deck plates of the balance screamed in protest as every spare watt of power was shunted into stabilizing the resonance grid. A cascade of sparks erupted from a secondary console, and Tanaka yelped, pulling his hand back from the singed controls. The cost was being paid here and now. The ship itself groaned under the strain, the very air vibrating with contained energy. As the Iron Resolve's weapon port glowed with apocalyptic power, a single impossibly bright beam of golden light shot from the invisible lattice. It was a tiny fraction of the energy Valerius was about to unleash, but it was focused with surgical, absolute precision. It was not a weapon of war. It was a scalpel. The beam struck the command tower of the Iron Resolve. There was no grand explosion. The bridge section simply vanished. The superheated light vaporized the armored hull and everything within it in less than a millisecond. The main cannon, its firing sequence severed, discharged its energy harmlessly into its own superstructure, gutting the forward third of the ship in a silent internal fire. Their iron resolve was broken with a whisper of light. The decapitated flagship drifted, its lights flickering and dying. Across the hegemony fleet, the chaos resolved into a stunned, horrified paralysis. Their Lord Justicar was gone. Their invincible ship was a crippled wreck. Their doctrine was a smoking ruin, its failure broadcast for all their worlds to see. The public feed from the hegemony homeworld showed scenes of panicked silence in their own public squares. Hegemony fleet. Thorne's voice was now broadcast across all channels, calm, steady, and imbued with an authority forged in the crucible of the last few minutes. Your commander has been relieved. Your ultimatum is void. Power down your weapon systems and await instructions. Another path is open to you. He did not need to raise his voice. The silence he spoke into was absolute. We hold the line not with anger, but with arithmetic. One by one, the iron-gray ships complied. Weapon ports closed. Engine signatures dampened. The cage around Oakhaven dissolved, its bars bent and broken. The crimson timer that had dominated every screen vanished, replaced by the serene blue of the Terran Mandate's crest. Rostova let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours, slumping slightly in her chair, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. Confirmed, Admiral Tanaka reported, his voice hoarse. He had a strip of synth skin over the burn on his hand, a minor but visible cost of the victory. The entire hegemony fleet is standing down. They are requesting a parley. Granted, Thorne said simply. He looked at the hololith, at the silent enemy ships, no longer threats but merely vessels full of confused and defeated soldiers. He had held to the Mandate's core ethos. He had taught first, and he had been forced to fight. But he had done so with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. They came to teach a lesson and instead received an education. In the hours that followed, the true accounting began. The hegemony captains, their chain of command shattered, were cooperative. The 10,000 colonists they had demanded were never mentioned again. The balance's log was updated: 2 crewmen with minor burns, 1 officer with a secondary energy burn, and a ship-wide power system that would require weeks of repair. The Lattice drones had suffered a 20% burnout rate from the strain. The price was real, but it was a price they had willingly paid. Pathfinder displayed the final entry for the public record. A new communication, this one from the Hegemony High Command, arrived. It was terse, stripped of all arrogance. It was a message of unconditional surrender for this sector, and it contained a single system-wide decree. The ultimatum doctrine, as authored by the late Lord Justicar Valerius, is hereby rescinded and struck from all military and political texts. Its use is now classified as a crime against cosmic reason. The ledger was now a law. The institutional precedent was set, etched into the public records of 2 civilizations. The cost of a doctrine based on unbreakable ultimatums had been its own public humiliating collapse. Thorne had not just saved Oakhaven, he had fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of the entire quadrant. He had proven that mercy and mathematics, when combined, were a far greater power than brute force alone. Thorne stood on the bridge, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind a profound sense of weary satisfaction. The crew was working quietly, efficiently, their movements crisp and professional. The immediate crisis was over. He watched the main screen where the first of the Mandate's relief ships were now moving toward Oakhaven, their lights like welcoming beacons in the dark. The mirror drones of the Great Lattice their purpose served cooled from their incandescent state, their reflective surfaces dulling to the color of burnished pewter. Power is not a hammer. It is a lever, and it is most effective when used to lift others up, not to pin them down. An ultimatum is the brute's confession that he has run out of ideas, a declaration of intellectual bankruptcy. We offered a different currency, a clear accounting, a balanced ledger where the cost of cruelty is always eventually paid by the cruel. We did not conquer them. We simply held up a mirror and let them defeat themselves. The balance is restored.